All right. Well, hello, folks. This is Joe Jarrick with the Missouri Department of Conservation, welcoming you to our MDC Wild webcast on creepy critters in Missouri. So thanks for joining us for this Halloween special wild webcast. We are joined by our topic expert, Erin Shank. And Erin, welcome.
Hi, Joe. Happy to be here.
Well,
this is one of my favorite topics.
And mine too. Thanks for joining us. Folks, Erin is the urban wildlife biologist with the Powder Valley Nature Center in the St. Louis area. Erin, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, I've been at Powder Valley as an urban wildlife biologist in St. Louis for over 18 years, which is kind of confounding to me, but I sure do love it there, which is why I keep sticking around. As part of my job, I get to talk to all sorts of people about wildlife, from deer and geese to bees and butterflies, and work a lot with community partners as well on habitat projects.
Wonderful. And we get this time of year to have you also talk about some maybe less popular or well-known, but incredibly fascinating creepy critters. So that's what we're going to do today. We have a top 10 list from Erin, and we are going to get to that. But before, we want to remind folks that if you have some questions, please share them through the chat box on the right side of your webcast screen, and we will try to answer those questions throughout our hour together now. Sorry if we run into any technical difficulties with questions, but again, share them and we will reply to them in the program as best as we can. So without further ado, hey, Erin.
Yes.
You ready for the top 10?
Oh, I was born ready for this.
All right, let's see the slug caterpillar. It's kind of cool looking, but creepy at the same time. Tell us more.
Well, to me, it looks like if I were an alien parent, this would be a nice little alien stuffed animal to give to my child, you know? I mean, what in the world is that thing? So these guys are caterpillars, but instead of legs like we normally think of caterpillars as having, they have these like peg legs, and they have little suckers on their feet that help them move along. They get this number 10 spot because they're just totally bizarre looking.
Well, they kind of are. They look almost like a crinkled up leaf, and then like so suckers.
Yeah, which is part of their disguise. Not all of them are so well disguised. But you know, those little hairs on their body, these are the kinds of things that you want to look at, but don't touch them because they can give you a little bit of a zap with their spines there. Oh yeah, there you see the saddleback
right,
caterpillar.
So that's not a t-shirt he's wearing, right? That's actually the coloration.
It's not, but I bet you can find something like that on Amazon.
And is that another defense mechanism that they also use to say, hey, don't eat me?
That's exactly right. Yes. So some of them use camouflage as a defense, and other ones it kind of go the complete opposite direction of big, bright, bold colors, which in nature oftentimes means there's some kind of venom or toxin that is carried by that critter.
Right. And for our viewers today, the key takeaway, not only is this critter creepy, but as you said, they have stingers. So do not handle them with your bare hands, kind of leave them be, right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, they're not going to hurt you necessarily, but they might cause you a little bit of rash or burning, which is never especially fun.
Right.
Hey, Joe, I did come armed today, since we're so close to Halloween, with a few really great jokes.
Okay, let's try it now.
Caterpillar one.
Okay.
You know what caterpillars do on New Year's Day? They turn over a new leaf.
All right. So now we have a new classification of mom jokes. We've had some dad jokes, and now we have some mom jokes. Okay. I love it. I love it. Well, with caterpillars, next in line comes our number 9. Most people are familiar, and I'd say most people are grossed out by this too. Tell us about leeches.
Leeches. And leeches, not just in Missouri, but they have kind of a worldwide recognized creep factor, because there's a large number of species all across the planet of leeches. They are segmented worms, and their bodies can kind of expand and contract. They can flatten themselves out where they look much larger, and then they can kind of, compact their bodies into more ball-like, smaller sizes. So it's a little hard to really measure how big they get. But in Missouri, we see leeches maybe 1/2 inch to 3 inches, somewhere in that range. So they are parasitic, and will attach themselves to a host and drink the bodily fluids of that host. They also, when they attach, they secrete an enzyme that is kind of an anesthetic and also an anti-clotting substance, so that they can continue to drink the bodily fluids without the blood clotting, and also then the host doesn't really notice that they've got a parasite attached.
Right, and I know with leeches, for how gross they are, way back in the day, and even now in modern medicine, leeches, because they have this anti-clotting enzyme and an anesthetic, they're often used with limb reattachments in people, where they actually, even in modern medicine, will put the leech on the limb, or like your finger, if it gets cut off, on the finger, to help pull blood back into that reattached limb. So they're actually kind of medically very helpful.
That's their role in medical field for centuries is really interesting, and that folks noticed that benefit to wound healing, to draw blood into an area that needs healing. So it's weird and fascinating.
Well, right. And we also can't really tell their size, because kind of like ticks, as they engorge themselves on the blood, they just get bigger and bigger.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Their bodies can expand. Mm-hmm.
These are kind of one of the original vampires.
Yeah, they really are. Good one, Joe.
Yes. Hey, Erin,
well,
we're going to back up for a quick minute. Pardon me. Lucas wants to know the slug caterpillars. So they're true caterpillars, and then they change into butterflies?
They change into moths.
Into moths. Okay, so it's caterpillar in the moth family. Cool.
Yeah, and typically by midsummer, most of those moths have all kind of emerged as their final form.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. So, okay, leeches. And again, those of us old enough to remember the movie Stand By Me, when those boys came out of that pond, and it's probably happened to some of our listeners. I know it's happened to me, where you come out of water.
Leeches, and just kind of pull them off, and not pleasant, but it's sure it doesn't hurt or anything. I didn't pass out like those boys in the movie.
Right, and they're kind of, they have different colors and everything, and the one we have on our slide, kind of the green with the orange underbelly.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest ones that we find here in Missouri. And then the ones you see on that snapping turtle there, some leeches are really specific to the kind of host that they can feed on. And so those are called smooth turtle leeches, and they'll live about their whole lives on a turtle. They'll reproduce on the turtle and lay their eggs on the turtle, and they will feed on the turtle, not through the shell like you see there. They can't feed through the shell, but they'll generally attach somewhere the turtle can't get them off.
Okay. Oh. And, poor leeches, they're just misunderstood. And again, thank you for this cartoon. Sometimes they seek out therapy.
I know. Well, I know leeches aren't snails, but because of that picture of the leech on the turtle, I wanted to ask you a question, Joe. What do you call a snail on a ship?
A snail on a ship.
A snailer.
A snailer, like a sailor. Okay. All right.
They're pretty good jokes, aren't they?
These are amazing. Yes. Yes, they are.
Joe's never going to invite me back as a co-host.
You're wonderful. This even adds to it, Erin. So thank you. So gross leeches, bloodsuckers, and then our number 8, people often think as bloodsuckers, but none of the species in Missouri are so. So let's
You're
talk
right.
about our next creepy critter. And what would Halloween be without bats?
Yeah. And that's really why they get a place on this list, is that it's the Halloweeny aspect of them. Is that a word? Halloweeny?
Sure.
It is now. So they're really not creepy, and we do not have, as you said, Joe, we don't have vampire bats in this part of North America. So all of the bats that we have in Missouri are insectivores. And so they're really neat critters. They're our only mammal that's capable of true flight, which is pretty cool. And they're really important for our healthy ecosystems, especially given that they can consume so many insects in one evening of feeding.
Right, and I've heard things such as a single bat can consume up to like 2,000 mosquitoes on a summer night.
They're
So,
quite effective with their echolocation and quick, the way they fly and turn very quickly. And
I
yeah.
mean, they really are freaky and fascinating. And one thing, Aaron, people don't realize about bats, some of them help with pollination.
Yeah, that's right, and especially globally, bats can be extremely important pollinators. You think of bats in the tropics, especially, and they will drink nectar from large flowers and therefore help with pollination.
Right.
Also, look at that face,
I
Joe.
mean,
Look how
right.
cute that baby is.
Right. It's
I
kind of
know.
like, it could be one only the mother could love, but I think they are really cute too.
They are,
So let's
and
hear it
really
for bats.
important species.
Well, right, and many of them are endangered.
Yes. So especially in the past 15 years or so, we've seen the spread of something called white nose syndrome in bats, and it's a fungus that has been introduced to North America and really is detrimental to bats and has caused a precipitous decline in some of their populations.
Over 90% in some caves and other areas where now bats over the winter, many species hibernate in caves or in large groups.
That's right. And the danger of this fungus is that it disrupts that hibernation and causes them some respiratory distress, and they wake up too early. And once they wake up, they have metabolic needs that cannot be met because there's not enough food out there on the landscape.
Right.
There aren't insects that have emerged yet.
Right.
So, and that's where the mortality comes from.
So it's kind of over winter when this fungus prompts them to wake up and fly out of the cave in search of insects because they're hungry, but there aren't any insects to be found.
Yep.
So,
They wake up too early. Yep.
right. And kind of a general note to folks, once we get into the really cold weather of our true winter, if you do see bats flying around, especially in any numbers, let your local conservation office know. That might be, some important news as far as
Sure.
perhaps white nose syndrome or things like that. But not
Yep.
all bats kind of roost over the winter or kind of hibernate in large groups. We have some that are more tree bats.
That's right. And if you're familiar with things like shagbark hickory, that's a really good example of a tree that offers really wonderful bat roosting locations because of the nature of that bark, and it's kind of peely, and the bats have such small bodies they can fit under that peeled bark between the bark and the tree, and that's oftentimes where they will sleep.
Right. And when people think bats, especially with Halloween, we have these visions of these giant animals like, the tropical flying fox bats and things like that. But most bats here in Missouri, they're pretty tiny. Can you kind of
They're very
describe, like,
small.
what
The
are we
ones we
talking
have in
about?
Missouri are quite small.
Like
Oh, mouse sized.
mouse
So
size, right?
yeah, or smaller even. So very little.
So even though they're on our creepy critter list, we kind of think they're pretty cute and they're very important to our ecosystem.
Really just there, yeah, because Halloween, and it's a good reason to celebrate some bats.
Well, let's celebrate some bats. And less kind of furry and fascinating and just kind of totally gross is our number 7. Tell us about this list maker.
Oh yeah, now we're really getting into the creepy stuff. And when I say creepy, I hope folks know I don't mean that I find these gross necessarily or scary, mostly just so fascinating because how different this life form is from kind of the mammalian life forms and vertebrate life forms that we're most familiar with. So this is a planaria, and it has a real primitive body. And Missouri has a number of species of planaria. The one pictured here is actually a pink planaria that's exclusively found in Devil's Icebox Cave, which is in Rockbridge State Park in Boone, Missouri, near Columbia. But planarias are hermaphroditic, and they essentially breathe through their skin, so they're really important indicators of water quality. So in that way, they're pretty neat.
Okay, we're going to back up a little bit. So you mentioned they're hermaphroditic. Can you kind of explain what that means?
So they have both male and female parts, and so they can essentially fertilize each other, which is often how they reproduce. However, there's something even more interesting about planaria, which is that many of them can asexually reproduce by growing from a fragment. So if they are cut, for example, in half or in several pieces, each one of those pieces can grow into a full planaria.
Whoa, that's pretty unique.
Yeah.
Now, we know that like some species of amphibians, you know, the old, if you cut a frog's leg off, it will grow back, but the leg won't grow into a frog. So this is really a unique animal where just a segment of it will grow into an entirely new animal.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it's really a unique, interesting phenomenon.
Well, and I think we have to back up too, because you still have me with the mouth is in the middle of their underside.
Yeah.
And it's the
So
only opening.
Yeah, so they have one opening, and you can interpret that exactly how I mean it.
Everything comes in and goes out through one opening.
What goes in must come out, and so they eat and defecate or excrete their waste product through the same opening. And here, this picture, this is actually super creepy because this planaria pictured here, also known as the hammerhead worm, is actually an invasive species we're trying to keep an eye on. But you can see in the picture at the bottom right that, that planaria is actually consuming an earthworm, and you can see how it's doing that at the center of its body. Oh. And so these planaria are not native to North America, have likely been brought in on plants from other parts of the world, and they're ferocious predators of earthworms. So if you inadvertently plant these in your garden, they can really wreak havoc on the kind of the subterranean life that we rely on for healthy soils. Mm-hmm. So if you do see these, it's important to be able to identify them and destroy them. But again, you don't want to cut them in half because then you're going to double your population. And so the best bet, the best bet is to either use salt. This sounds terrible, but salt or fire, so we'll kill them.
Right, and salt, these, I don't know how similar they are, but they remind me a little bit of, say, slugs. And a good way to control slugs in your yard or garden is through salts. Eggshells also work because that kind of cuts their body up. Is this invasive species? Is it throughout the entire state, or do we know?
No, we really don't know. There have been very few reports in Missouri. They're a little hard to verify because we really need to see the critter itself to identify it as this invasive hammerhead worm. But it's something to keep an eye on, certainly, especially if you're a gardener and you're purchasing plants from garden stores, especially if those plants are coming from far away.
Right. So another good reason to kind of grow native, plant native, keep it native.
That's right, exactly.
Right. Now, we're showing this planaria with a worm. On average, how big are they?
These particular planaria can get to be, generally they're going to be about 4 to 6 inches, less than 6 inches.
Okay, so this is something, I mean, we're not talking tiny. This is something you could readily see
Yeah.
when you're digging in the dirt, and they're the hammerheads, so we should pay close attention to the one end that kind of looks
Hmm.
like a hammer.
Yeah, and that's not, as you know, that's not actually the mouth of the animal, but
Right.
that is the nerve center of the animal.
Okay.
So it is, in some sense, a head. But remember, you can grow a head from the tail of this guy, which is just so weird.
Okay, that has my brain hurting a little bit here, but they are well deserving of their ranking on this list because they really are creepy. Yeah.
Yes, they really are.
And our number 6, I mean, it's a well-known and endangered native species, but just looking at it and everything, it has some creepy qualities to it. Tell us more about
Yeah.
the alligator snapping turtle, Erin.
Sure. These are really neat critters as well. They can grow really large. So they're not very common. The common snapping turtle is the one that most of us are going to be familiar with. And sometimes those common snapping turtles end up in funny places, especially after a series of heavy rains. You might see them, crawl up onto a parking lot from a drainage ditch or something. Alligator snapping turtles are really more confined to Mississippi River habitat, but they can grow up to 150 pounds.
And
So they can get quite large. They look like swimming dinosaurs is
right.
kind of how I always think of them.
Now, when you say
Um,
150
yeah.
pounds, I have seen some that now we're talking like kind of a trash can lid,
Hmm.
kind 2 feet in diameter and huge.
Yes, absolutely. Their upper shell length can be 2 feet in diameter, gigantic. So one of the reasons why they make this list is their tongue.
Right.
So you can see in that picture, it's just tiny, but right in the center of their mouth, there you can really see it is this little appendage in their mouth, and that is their lure. Just like and I would use worms on a hook to try to catch fish, they have the same idea, and has evolved over millennia to be their lure on their tongue. They're so darn lazy that they will just lay there in the river with their mouth open until something comes and bites their tongue, and then they'll snap down on it. And of course, they have really powerful jaws and can snap the bones of a fish and kill it immediately to consume it.
Wow. So you said the weight they can get up to like 150 pounds and have a shell 2 feet in diameter. Yeah, we don't want to be kind of poking and prodding at these things.
No. Another thing to keep in mind with these turtles is that they really don't mature or reproduce until they're about 11, 12, 13 years of age. So they can grow to be quite old as well, just as many slow moving, especially turtles and tortoises can. But that's quite a long time just to reach maturity.
Well, that is, and now we know that, tortoises kind of have that fame as being one of the longer lived or lived animals growing, making it
Mhm.
past 100 years or so. Alligator snapping turtles, what's the idea on about how old they tend to get naturally in the wild?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure we know entirely. Certainly upwards of 60 to 70 years, but perhaps longer.
Wow, that is amazing. And thank you for these great photos. Again, the lower right shows a close-up of the little lure on the end of its tongue that it uses to catch fish.
That's right. That's the close up there. You can see that fish is about to really go for it there, Joe.
Right. Tasty worm. A key identifier, this makes me think too. Now you said alligator snapping turtles, they're a threatened species in Missouri, I believe.
Yeah, they're considered rare.
They're
So
rare.
that is a species of conservation concern distinction. We are interested in knowing where they're found. So the alligator snapping turtle you see there on the left, the one with the mouth wide open,
Right.
and you can see it, or the shell is very spiny, remarkably more spiny then the turtle that you see there on the right, which is the common snapping turtle, has not necessarily a smooth shell, but not nearly the kind of spines and spikes that the alligator snapping turtle has.
Right, and hence its name, because its back kind of looks like the back of an alligator, having those kind of
Yes.
ridges and spines or spikes and things like that. So hence its name.
Yep.
All right, good to
Absolutely.
know. Folks, again, we will do our best. If you have some questions, share them through the chat box, and we will answer them as we can. So thank you for that, and thank you again for joining us. Now moving on to number 5, another myth-laden critter that people tend to freak out about. Well, some people keep them as pets. So tell us more about tarantulas.
The tarantulas. Missouri does have a tarantula native to our state, which is pretty neat. Again, kind of like bats, this one makes the list because of its association with Halloween, and even though there's nothing really to be afraid of with regards to a tarantula. However, they tend to, the females will make underground burrows where they will lay their eggs, and those will be lined with silk. And that is kind of like a classic bad guy, like behavior, to be in a silk-lined underground layer.
Villainous, yes.
Villainous.
Quite the villain.
Yeah. Yeah. So as they spend their day in their silk-lined burrows, they don't actually make webs. So some of the stuff we learn about in the movies, believe it or not, isn't true. But they're predators in that they chase and hunt their prey or sit and wait to attack prey. They do not build webs, although they can, as I said, spin silk, which they do line their nests with.
But they will chase
live
them
a very
down.
long time. Up to 30 years, in the wild, up to 30 years. Males, sorry guys, tend to live only a year in the wild.
Well, that seems pretty unfair. The big question is why? Why the big discrepancy between the ages?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, that we understand the answer to that. But after males mate, they tend to not live much longer.
And we know with some species of spiders, infamously the black widow, whose claim to fame, one of them is tending to eat her mate right after mating, and his purpose has been served. So do we have any evidence of them, kind of the females, then cannibalizing males?
Yeah, they don't tend to exhibit that behavior, but they do lay their eggs on, and feed their developing, provide some food for their young that will leave the female after about a week or so, when they emerge from their eggs.
So does the mom stay in the burrow once the eggs hatch?
Just for about a week, she will stay with those young.
So there is some caretaking behavior associated with them. That's fascinating,
which is pretty unusual for any kind of an invertebrate species, but we do see that with some.
Right, that's fascinating. Now, Erin, you mentioned we have one native species of tarantula in Missouri.
Yes.
And what's that one called?
It's often called the Missouri tarantula or the Texas brown tarantula. So females are maybe 2 inches or so, and males are a little bit smaller than that.
Okay, and
but that's the one that you see pictured here. And they do, they do have fangs with venom, which is how they immobilize their prey. But that venom really has no threat or won't cause harm to people. So as you said, they can be very docile, and some people like to keep them as pets.
Right, and the venom, I mean, it may hurt if they bite you, but again, unlike some other venomous spiders, you're not going to have a major reaction or things.
That's right. It's not going to kill off tissue or cause a wound.
Right.
So,
there's the hairs on their body, and especially on their legs. Aren't there some unique attributes or qualities with the kind of spiny hairs?
Sure, there are. They've evolved to really be or exist in warm, dry places, more desert-like environments, or glade environments here in Missouri. And so those hares do protect their body from desiccation or from dehydration.
Right. And is it also kind of a defense against some predators where I know they can't like shoot them or things, but will they release
Yes,
them?
that prickly, that they will, yes. And that prickly kind of sensation can deter predators as well.
Yeah, not a real good mouth feel, you know?
No,
Um,
no, it's not.
So do you know by chance, we have one native species, any idea of how many species there are? Kind of,
Globally of
yeah.
tarantulas? Yeah, I don't know that.
And that's okay, because I do know there are in the tropics of South and Central America, I believe, the bird-eating tarantula that literally eats birds. It is huge, kind of the size of your, that one fits in the palm of your hand. The biggest species, I think, is as big as the palm of your hand. So at least they're not here.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Well, Joe, you know why you can't trust a spider though, right?
Oh, why, Aaron? Why?
Because they post stuff on the web.
Oh, so don't believe everything you hear from spiders, right? Because they post stuff
Right.
on the web. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, folks. And again, if you're enjoying our jokes today and the information, thank you for joining us. Share some questions with us. So moving on from tarantulas, here's another really beneficial and often misunderstood creepy critter in Missouri.
Yeah, turkey vultures have earned their place on this list, though. They have some extremely rude behaviors,
Yes.
which is what has earned them a list or a spot on this list. First of all, they're not exactly handsome animals, so they lack the feathers on their heads. And if you've ever seen other birds that maybe are infected with mites or have lost their feathers, I mean, birds are beautiful creatures until they lose their feathers. And then we see what really exists under there, which is fascinating, of course. And vultures lack those feathers on their heads naturally because parasites from the rotting meat that they consume would otherwise really like make themselves at home in those feathers and potentially cause problems for the bird. And so they simply don't have feathers on their head, so they don't provide that kind of entry spot for parasites to hitch a ride as they're digging their faces into a rotting carcass.
Well, I was going to say, it just makes cleanup a lot easier because, again, they put their whole heads into rotting carcasses, and they are one of nature's cleanup crews. So
they are,
even though they're gross to look at, nature finds a way, and they've evolved specifically to excel at cleaning up after us.
That's right. I mean, we've all seen vultures circling or above or feeding on roadkill in particular, and we've actually seen an expansion in other vulture populations like black vultures, and somewhat, at least partially, tied to our own expansion of our transportation system over the last century, which has led to more feeding sites for vultures along our roadways.
And that's often where we see them on roadways eating roadkill. Now, a fascinating thing, we see them soaring up high and they're catching thermal drafts and kind of the wind currents that keep them aloft. Noting on the slide, that close up, the nasal cavity or that nose hole, it's pretty impressive. And how do they use that?
Yeah, so most birds have a poor sense of smell, but this is one of the exceptions to that, in that vultures have evolved to really be able to smell out that rotting carrion from far away. And so they utilize that big nasal opening to, as air flows through there, to sense where their next meal might be coming from.
Right, and it's fascinating because they circle on these updrafts, so even some of those scents are brought up on these updraft winds to help them find prey, which includes, as we're seeing more often in Missouri, possum on the half shell, also known as armadillo.
That's right.
Right.
Yep. And one of the interesting things about vultures also, because they're eating rotten meat and the potential for parasites within that rotting meat, as we already discussed, is pretty high. Vultures have extremely acidic digestive fluids. So they utilize those not only in their digestive system in order to process that rotting meat, but they also use that as a defense mechanism in that if they're threatened, they can force themselves to vomit, and that very acidic digestive material can be harmful to whatever critter is threatening them.
And we see this a lot, especially with like fledglings, where if a predator is threatening the nest, these older fledglings, they might not be able to fly off. So even at that stage, they can literally projectile vomit this acid on potential predators. And yeah, that can mess you up. Oh, good to know.
It's fairly rude behavior.
Well, it's fairly rude. And wait, but we're not done yet. Their behavior gets even ruder from the other end. Tell us more.
It gets even worse.
We have no pictures of this, folks. We have no photos of this, but use your imagination.
I know. Yeah, we did you a favor and we provided no photos of them defecating on their own feet, which they will do in hot summertime to keep their feet cooler. And again, because their digestive fluids are so acidic, it's possible that doing that also acts as kind of an antiseptic for their legs and their feet that are also unprotected with no feathers on them.
Wow. Talk about, I mean, creepy critter, gross critter, more than anything.
These are not the ones you want to bring home for dinner with the family.
No, not so much. Do they, the turkey vultures, do they migrate?
So they do migrate. They'll migrate, but not fully migrate. In the summer, they'll stay here, and then really they migrate to the southern half of Missouri or Arkansas, kind of some of the southern states.
So they don't really have this tropical migration we know, like say hummingbirds or a lot of other species. They just kind of move.
They don't migrate like the neotropical migrants.
A little bit further south to kind of stay out of the worst of the winter.
Yes, stay out of the worst of the winter, protect those unfeathered parts of their body, and also where they're not going to have snow cover that will be covering up any of their food potential. Right.
Good to know. So let's hear it for the turkey vulture. Just when you thought it was gross beyond gross, I think our next one still gives me the willies. Talk about a vampire.
All right. So I don't know about you, but I'm guessing that there's at least some people that remember that scene in The Empire Strikes Back. There's the Mynock monster that latches onto the Millennium Falcon window. That monster, the mouth of that monster was inspired by the lamprey. So I always think of Star Wars, that scene in Star Wars when I think of the lamprey. So the chestnut lamprey in particular is a parasitic species. We have a couple other species of lampreys in Missouri, and not all of them are parasitic, but this one in particular is. And as you can see, its mouth is a toothy disc, which is terrifying.
Terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, how big do these things get?
Well, they can get about a foot long or so. The babies, the small ones are more like 6 inches, and then they can grow to 10 to 12 inches or so.
Okay.
They live primarily in our large streams or small rivers, Mississippi River system, and some of our larger reservoirs.
So they swim up, they pretty much attach this monster mouth onto their prey, and then they just
consume the body fluids.
Okay.
Yep. And then once they finish their meal, it'll drop off. But the kind of wonderful thing about the lamprey is it doesn't kill its host. So there's something to be said sometimes for that parasitic lifestyle in that, you can see that fish there has a wound from a lamprey, but it doesn't take enough from that host to kill it. It lets it live another day.
Just a little bit disfigured, but still. So we have 6 species in Missouri. And they're all, you said some are parasitic, some aren't. The ones that aren't attaching to fish and drinking their blood, what do they eat?
So they're bottom feeders. So they will eat small critters, invertebrates that kind of float along the bottom of a stream. Okay. We call them brook lampreys in general, and they tend to be a little smaller. They have narrower heads, but so they're not quite as frightening as that chestnut lamprey.
Okay, and I think we have some potential good news about this creepy critter. Unlike when we were talking the leeches, which will attach to us and other mammals. The lamprey. Yes. What's the saving grace for us warm-blooded critters?
Yeah, they're not interested in humans, and they're the kind of thing that you would notice right away and be able to prohibit from
pull off, scream, scrape off, burn, whatever.
Right. That's right.
Okay,
that's
so
right. So they're really not a threat to humans at all.
Okay, and they feed primarily on fish then?
Yes. They do.
Okay, so vampires of our waterways now include the chestnut lamprey.
Vampires straight from the Star Wars movies.
Right, and from my nightmares. Now this thing it's not lethal, and it's really gross to look at. So if we switch stuff up a bit, our next critter is kind of pretty, but really lethal, like zombie lethal.
Yeah, they are beautiful. And spider hawks, probably, if you've paid any attention in the hot days of summer to any patch of flowers you see in Missouri, you've probably seen some of these spider hawks, some of the smaller ones, but not all of them, but a lot of them tend to have those blue wings, which are really iridescent and beautiful, as you said, Joe. But the reason why they make the list is they have an absolute horror movie style of parenting, in that the female will hunt a spider and they'll sting that spider with a paralyzing venom. Which, on a side note, if you get stung by one of these, it is considered to be one of the most painful stings, at least that you could experience around Missouri. It hurts like the dickens, like an electric shock, and it will continue to hurt for a while. You won't die from it, but it'll potentially make you cry like a baby.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Just to be clear, this is a species of predatory wasp. So it's a member of the wasp family.
Did I say spider? I meant wasp.
It's the spider hawk wasp.
Yes.
So
spider hawk wasp.
Now they feed primarily on spiders, as their name says. But you said, are they aggressive? I mean, so if they do sting us, it hurts like no other. But unless we kind of harass them, they'll pretty much leave us alone.
Yeah, generally, they can be very aggressive to other insects as well, especially other wasps. And they will feed on other insects, but they do tend to lay their eggs on spiders. So they will paralyze that spider, like I said, with their venom, take that still living spider back to the nest and lay the one individual egg on that spider. And as that larva develops, it will eat that still living but paralyzed spider alive. And they will provide that spider for each one of their eggs.
Kind of speechless. Wow.
I know.
Wow.
It's like, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, and I mean, fortunately, without getting too complicated, the spiders and other invertebrates don't have kind of the same nervous system we do. So they're not kind of, I'm imagining this happening to a person, and I can't even go there, but that is really the only reason we need to find this creepy. Yikes.
I know, it is.
Yikes.
It's creepy. It's also, like we said earlier, fascinating, and you just kind of have to be a little bit in awe of the evolution of that kind of behavior and relationship with prey.
Hey, we do have a question too. Back to lamprey. So if I catch a fish with either a fresh or an old lamprey wound, it's still okay to eat and everything, right?
Sure, it definitely is. You know, if there's ever, and this goes for any kind of harvest of an animal that you may eat, so whether that's fish or wildlife, if there's ever a sign of infection, so I mean, not to be too gross, but you know, pus, redness, you know, then we wouldn't recommend eating that particular animal. But typically, these things are not going to cause that kind of an infection in an animal
Okay.
or in a fish.
So good to know. And you bring up a really good point with any game species, fish, anything like that. If the animal looks to be ill or kind of diseased in any way, like you said, you know, pussy wounds or things, we just recommend not eating that. It's
That's
better
right.
safe than sorry.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, well, we are cruising through here and we're already at number 2 with the spider hawk wasp. But before we get to number 1,
Yeah, I couldn't stop at 10. So there was a couple that really I felt like could be a number 1. But you know, decisions, and you got to make the hard call sometimes. So I have a couple of honorable mentions, and the first one goes to the loggerhead shrike. Look at this cute little bird,
I mean,
right?
it's adorable.
We'd be creepy about that guy. Well, it is a carnivorous bird, so they feed on a lot of insects, but they'll also feed on other small animals. But like, or unlike a lot of our other predatory birds, such as raptors, owls, hawks, and whatnot, they don't have talons. They don't have those sharp, powerful claws to pick their prey apart and squeeze them really hard.
Right.
So instead, they impale their prey on branches or fences. And yep, there you go. That cute little bird. Look what it does to its prey, which is really innovative, if you ask me. You know, not to be limited by its own anatomy there. It just uses the resources that it has at hand and uses hawthorn bushes and locust trees and barbed wire fences and whatever it can find to impale that prey. And then not only does that, you know, hold it in place, but then they can piece it apart and kind of pull the meat off and feed off of that, and even leave that as a temporary cache of food when food is getting scarce, say, in colder months, or at times of breeding when their energy needs are really high.
So it's kind of like, you know, back in the day when you would, you know, dry meat or fish kind of by putting it on spikes out in the sun. They're doing this with evidently frogs and lizards also, and I think even small mice.
Yep, so the small animals, insects, grasshoppers, they're not terribly picky.
And well, how big are they? They're pretty tiny too.
Yeah, I mean, they're between larger than a sparrow, smaller than a blue jay.
So adorable little kind of killers.
They are.
They're the cute killers on our list.
I know.
Aw, I don't want to be a mouse, but how adorable.
And if you see that kind of thing out and about, especially in, you know, the summer and whatnot, at least now you know how that happens.
Well, right, when you're, you know, walking along and you see some critter impaled on, you know, a thorn or something, now you know that this cute little tiny terror is responsible.
That's right.
Well, I think we should give a shout out to the loggerhead shrike. Good job.
Absolutely. Well deserved.
Well deserved. And then we have another honorable mention, which, again,
yeah, this one, it's a little, I mean, it's similar in some ways to the tarantula hawk in that it makes the list because it has some really creepy habits. In that it feeds on other insects, and it's actually notorious for being kind of audacious in that they will attack insects larger than themselves. And in flight, even, you can see they have spikes on their legs, and they use those spikes to kind of hold their prey in place, and then they will pierce the body of the prey and inject digestive fluids into the body that will immediately start to liquefy the insides, which they will then suck back out.
Okay, so as we
Yep.
see here, I think, is that a locust or a grasshopper the robber
Yeah,
fly is
that's
feeding
some
on?
kind of a grasshopper and then a moth in the other one. And that is how they feed. You'll see these, they're fairly common. I mean, they're large for a fly, but their body is really distinct with that kind of enlarged thorax, the very spiny legs, and the elongated abdomen. They're fairly distinct looking.
Well, right in those legs, the spiky legs, that I find so fascinating. So they kind of feed like spiders do, where they inject their
Yeah,
prey, they liquefy the insides, and then slurp them out like a smoothie.
right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of a web, and you said like on wings, so they will fly through the air, catch a big bug in the air.
Yeah. And then basically bring it back to some surface where they
Right,
can then slurp it up.
right. Well, that's
Yeah.
the robber fly, folks. We're just glad that they're tiny. You said about how big are they?
You know,
Smaller than your pinky?
maybe small, definitely smaller than your pinky, about half pinky size. So they're fairly large they're larger than a house fly, but not the size of a wasp.
Thank
And
goodness.
they're not going to hurt you, but they do bite. I mean, if you try to handle one and you get bit, you'll be letting that thing go.
Here's another opportunity, folks, to like just leave nature be in this case. Do we know why they were called robber flies?
Well, I think it's that they sneak up on their prey, basically, and, rob them of their insides.
Okay, appropriately named then. Well, all right. So we've gone through our 9 with some honorable mentions. And Erin, we have our, again, number 1 creepy critter.
Mm-hmm.
Which one's that?
Well, the horsehair worm, Joe. It's just, I mean, some of these things are stranger than fiction, but this one really takes the cake. Horsehair worms, let's start out with telling folks this is no threat to you. They are not interested in humans at all, but they are thin worms that can grow up to even 3 feet in length, sometimes form these knots. Sometimes they're called Gordian knots, if you're familiar with the old Greek kind of story about the Gordian knot. And their larvae are parasitic and will grow inside of a host, which is typically a grasshopper, but can be like a katydid or something in that family. And then when it is time for that larva to emerge as an adult, this is the crazy part, is they essentially force their host through a mechanism we don't entirely understand to emerge itself in water, to basically drown itself, so that it can be released back into the water, which is where the adult needs to be to reproduce and survive. So that is just totally bizarre, and there's a lot we don't understand within that process of how in the world that parasite essentially coaxes that host to emerge itself in water and drown so that it can emerge.
Okay, so we're going to break this down a little bit. We have some other creepy critters that capture their prey, paralyze it, and put a single egg in it for the young to feed off of, and boom, done, emerged from that husk and
Right.
go on your way. We have other critters that inject their prey and then drink the liquefied innards. Now, they inject an egg into prey, and then that little egg, that parasite, eats around inside. But the key thing is they act somehow on the nervous system of these grasshoppers to turn them into zombies, where they just are compelled to go into water. So somehow these critters are alive. They can still move despite having most of their innards eaten. And then they go to water, they drown themselves, and then the larvae emerge in the water.
You got it right.
So this isn't.
That is, yeah,
this
actually what happens.
This is evolved. This isn't a simple creepy critter. This thing is evolved on several levels.
I mean, that is a complex relationship for sure.
Really?
And to be able to chemically infect a nervous system like that, to at the very end of the host's life, to get it to submerge itself like that is, yeah.
Well, just eating it
You know
from the
what? You just
inside
gotta
and
respect
keeping it
the
alive.
horsehair worm.
I do. Now, are they found by themselves, or do you find them like in mass?
So, no, you can find them in mass, and that's sometimes where that Gordian knot name comes from, is that especially when they're reproducing, they'll kind of knot up with each other, and then they can lay a lot of eggs. The females will lay strings of eggs along the bottom of a stream or whatnot, and there can be tens of thousands of eggs within, one brood.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I may have been mistaken. So they don't inject the eggs. The eggs find their own way onto and then
Right.
into.
Yep. So there's various ways those eggs can kind of directly enter the host, where if that young horsehair worm encounters a cricket or a katydid directly, they can enter through kind of some sharp appendages on their bodies, or they can have what's called like a transport host, where they can essentially form like a cyst or something on another host, which transports them into an environment where they can find crickets and katydids to infect.
Even more horrifying. That's
It
even more. So can this affect, so say, one of these things gets into a cricket, is doing its work, and then something eats that cricket. Will that thing that ate the cricket then have any problems, or will the horsehair worm larvae affect an animal that has eaten its host?
No, it won't. It's a pretty close relationship, actually, between horsehair worms and their host. So at that point, the horsehair worm would be digested and destroyed by the digestive system of the predator that ate the host.
Okay, I mean, just good to know, because let's say theoretically it's in a cricket, a frog eats a cricket. I love frog legs, so no worries for me or the frog.
No worries for you. You're okay. We won't let you become a zombie from the horsehair worms,
Okay,
Joe.
thank goodness.
Not today.
And you said they're in masses, so you can, if you're, I don't know if lucky is the word, but you can find them like a handful of long spaghetti in a body of water.
Yep, that's right. I mean, it doesn't even have to, they'll be in kind of smaller pools of water, small ponds. It tends to be more quiet waters, not fast flowing water.
Okay, so still waters. Okay. Well, that's our number one creepy critter, just from our list. Now, Erin,
you know what their favorite sport is, though?
Oh.
Horsehair worms. Cricket.
Their favorite food and sport happens to be cricket.
Yep.
These are good. They're memorable.
Well, are they?
Yes, thank you.
Now, I don't think I'm going to quit my day job and go into comedy, but.
Oh, I'm with you. I always tell folks I have a face for radio, so it's working out. Well, Erin, thank you. This was kind of a short list. There are many other creepy and non-creepy critters that are native to Missouri. And if folks want to know more, we invite you to visit our website at mdc.mo.gov and visit our online field guide. So this is a picture of our homepage. If you see at the top, circled in yellow is Discover Nature. So if you click on that, you'll get an assortment of things such as places to go and things to do, but a key one is our online field guide. So that can help you learn more about these creepy critters and other critters in Missouri.
It's a great resource. Even as a wildlife biologist in the state, I use our own field guide on a regular basis.
See, it's always handy for everyone out there. So again, Erin, thank you for joining us. We had Erin Shank, urban wildlife biologist at Powder Valley Nature Center, sharing her top 10 plus list of creepy critters in Missouri as our Halloween special offering. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Joe, and happy Halloween to everybody.
And back at you. You are always a pleasure, and you bring such expertise and humor. So thanks for the jokes, Erin.
No problem. Hey, one last one before I go. What do ticks and the Eiffel Tower have in common?
Oh, I don't know.
They're both parasites.
Oh, I love that. That's good.
And on that
Parasites
note,
and parasites. Yes, I like that. Well done. Thank you again to our topic expert, Erin. And folks, thanks for joining us. If you want to hear this wild webcast, we'll have it uploaded in a few days or sooner. And we have other wild webcasts. So visit our website at mdc.mo.gov, and you can even just search wild webcasts. So thanks for joining us today, and we wish you all a great day. Happy Halloween, and it's a beautiful day. Get outside and discover nature.